Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and finding your phone without signal, your lights dead and your bank card useless. The internet is gone, the grid is silent, and the United States is paralyzed. Not by bombs, not by missiles, but by This is the nightmare scenario experts have been warning about for years. A full-scale cyberattack that could bring America to its knees in just 72 hours. Tonight, we're going to break down how such an attack might unfold, what the first 3 days of chaos would look like, and why the US government fears this even more than a nuclear strike. The story starts in the shadows, far away from Washington, D.C. in underground facilities in Eastern Europe and Asia. Hacker collectives linked to hostile states train daily on American infrastructure maps, power grids, water plants, pipelines, and financial networks. They test weaknesses, probe firewalls, and mimic the exact systems that keep America alive. Intelligence reports already suggest that sleeper malware is inside parts of US infrastructure lying dormant, waiting for a signal to strike. Picture day 1. At 2:13 a.m. Eastern Time, small anomalies ripple through the Eastern interconnection, the giant power grid that supplies electricity to over 200 million Americans. Control rooms detect what looks like routine glitches, but within minutes, the failures cascade. New York goes dark. Washington, D.C. flickers. By sunrise, more than 40 million Americans are without power. Elevators are stuck between floors, and emergency lines are jammed with terrified callers. No missiles have flown. No troops have crossed borders. But a nation is already under attack. Airports grind to a halt. Without power, thousands of flights are grounded coast to coast. The FAA declares a national emergency, citing critical systems compromise in hospitals. Backup generators kick in, but fuel supplies are limited. By midday, intensive care units are already prioritizing which machines to keep running and which patients may not survive. Families rush to gas stations, but pumps are down. Grocery stores, their shelves already thin from supply chain stress, face panicked crowds emptying what little remains. Within hours, society begins to unravel, not because of bombs but because of silence, darkness, and fear. As the blackout spreads, the second front of the cyber war begins. Finance. Banks freeze as payment systems fail. ATMs refuse to dispense cash. Trading on Wall Street halts indefinitely, triggering panic in global markets. Foreign governments scramble to secure their own economies, while the dollar, once untouchable, suddenly looks vulnerable. The stock ticker is replaced with one chilling word: suspended. Meanwhile, the US military scrambles to respond. But here's the catch: military bases rely on civilian infrastructure while NORAD and Nuclear Command remain hardened. Many local installations are hit by the same outages. Fighter jets can scramble, but fuel distribution networks choke. Satellites orbit above, but the fiber optic lines that feed intelligence into command centers sputter. America's war machine is powerful, but without the grid, it begins to stumble. By the end of day 1, the realization sinks in. This isn't a drill, and it isn't random. It's coordinated. The enemy is invisible, and the battlefield is everywhere. In every home, every hospital, every city. Americans gather around battery-powered radios, hearing government officials urge calm while admitting they don't yet know how deep the compromise goes. The fear is no longer about if power will return, but whether America has already lost control of its most vital lifeline. And this is only the first 24 hours. What happens next will determine if America can recover, or if the greatest superpower on Earth is brought down without a single shot fired. As America enters the second day of the blackout, the situation shifts from shock to survival. The initial disbelief of day 1 gives way to the harsh reality that power is not coming back anytime soon. Across the country, neighborhoods begin to organize or unravel. In some places, neighbors pool resources, share generators, and look after the vulnerable. In others, chaos takes over. Looting erupts in major cities as stores remain dark and police struggle to maintain order. Without reliable communication, rumors spread faster than facts. Some claim foreign troops are already on US soil. Others insist that nuclear plants have been compromised. Fear becomes its own weapon, eroding trust in institutions that once seemed unshakable. Day 2 is when the food crisis begins. Refrigerators have now been without power for more than 30 hours. Fresh produce wilts, meat spoils, and milk turns sour. In urban centers where millions rely on just-in-time grocery deliveries, shelves are empty. Families who stocked up in the first hours of panic are already rationing. Rural areas fare slightly better. But even there, the gas needed for tractors, trucks, and backup generators is scarce. The Agriculture Department cautions that national food supplies may face severe disruption if the power grid remains down for another 48 hours. Meanwhile, the financial shock deepens. With the TMS down and digital transactions frozen, a cash economy emerges overnight. In some communities, cigarettes, bottled water, and gasoline become currency. Small businesses shutter, unable to operate without electronic payment. The stock market remains closed. Global investors panic, and the world begins to ask, if the United States can't protect its own systems, how can it protect the global order? Allies demand answers. Adversaries quietly celebrate. For the first time in generations, America looks fragile. On Capitol Hill, emergency sessions are held under generator power. Lawmakers debate whether to invoke martial law if order continues to break down. The president, speaking from a secure location, tries to reassure the public that restoration efforts are underway, but experts inside the Department of Homeland Security whisper a darker truth. They don't know how deep the infiltration goes. The malware may not just be disabling systems, it may be erasing critical data permanently. Every hour offline brings the possibility that some systems may never fully recover. The military, meanwhile, moves to a war footing. Cyber Command launches counterattacks, tracing IP addresses across continents, trying to identify the source. But attribution in cyberspace is notoriously murky. False flags, spoofed servers, and botnets create a hall of mirrors. Was it Russia, China, a rogue state working through proxies, or a coalition of actors seizing the moment? No one knows for sure. What is certain is that adversaries are watching closely, measuring America's response, testing how far they can push without triggering bombs and missiles. As day 2 turns to night, hospitals reach a breaking point. Fuel for generators dwindles, and without refrigeration, essential medicines like insulin spoil. Emergency rooms overflow, not just with the sick, but with the desperate people seeking shelter, power for medical devices, or simply hope. National Guard units are deployed in dozens of states, trying to keep order at overwhelmed hospitals and food distribution points. But even they are stretched thin, dependent on the same fragile logistics as everyone else. In the darkness, another danger emerges: misinformation. With TV, internet, and most radio silent, people cling to whatever information they can find. Flyers circulate claiming the government has collapsed. Conspiracy theories flood shortwave channels. Some communities rally behind local leaders, while others fall under the sway of opportunists and extremists. In just 48 hours, the unity of the nation begins to fracture. The greatest superpower on Earth is learning that wars are no longer fought only with tanks and planes. Wars are fought in the invisible realm of cyberspace, where the click of a mouse can be as destructive as the pull of a trigger. And as America stumbles through its second day in the dark, the question grows louder: who is behind the blackout, and what comes next? By the third day, the crisis has become more than a blackout hit. It is a national emergency testing the very foundations of American power. The thin veil of normal life has been ripped away, replaced by a landscape of fear, uncertainty, and survival. Across the United States, tens of millions now face a grim new reality. Gas stations run dry, long lines stretch 4 blocks, and fights break out over the last drops of fuel. Police forces, exhausted and undermanned, are joined by National Guard units, but even together they cannot be everywhere at once. Entire sections of major cities fall into darkness, both literally and figuratively, with local gangs and opportunists taking control. In rural areas, armed militias form, claiming to protect communities but also challenging the authority of the state. America is fragmenting under the weight of the invisible attack. Internationally, the consequences are just as dire. Stock markets across Europe and Asia plunge as the US economy stalls. The dollar, once unshakable, wobbles dangerously. China seizes the moment to project strength, offering assistance to developing countries reliant on American technology, framing itself as the stable alternative. Russia denies involvement but issues thinly veiled warnings that NATO should stay out of its sphere of influence. Allies like Japan, South Korea, and the UK scramble to secure their own infrastructure, fearing they could be next. What began as a crisis inside America now ripples across the globe, altering the balance of power in real time. Inside the Situation Room, the president faces impossible choices. Intelligence officials present competing theories. One faction argues that this was a Russian-led cyber offensive, designed to cripple American willpower without firing a shot. Another faction insists it was China, using advanced AI-driven malware to paralyze US grids and test responses. A third possibility looms, that it was not a state actor at all, but a decentralized network of hackers for hire, operating for profit in chaos. With no definitive proof, retaliation risks escalating into a shooting war with the wrong enemy. Yet doing nothing risks projecting weakness at the most vulnerable moment in modern history. Day 3 is when desperation begins to collide with politics. Governors demand more federal aid. Some openly defy Washington, imposing their own curfews and checkpoints. Citizens demand answers and scapegoats. Social media, when available through patchy satellite connections, explodes with accusations. Was this an inside job? Did America's own intelligence community fail the nation? Conspiracies multiply, some blaming NATO, others blaming tech companies, still others blaming secret treaties with foreign powers. The real truth is drowned in a sea of speculation, while the actual perpetrators remain hidden in the digital shadows. Meanwhile, America's adversaries test the waters more aggressively. Russian bombers probe Alaskan airspace. Chinese naval vessels push into contested waters in the South China Sea. Iran launches fresh rhetoric about American weakness. Each move is carefully calibrated enough to test the limits, not enough to trigger immediate war. The Pentagon responds with high alert orders, moving carriers, scrambling jets, and reinforcing bases worldwide. For the first time since the Cold War, nuclear forces are placed under heightened readiness. The message is clear. Even in the dark, America is not defenseless. But the question is whether the American people still believe it. As the sun sets on day 3, scenes unfold that few would have believed possible just 72 hours earlier. Families huddle around candles, unsure when the lights will return. Hospitals ration care, turning away patients they cannot sustain. Food riots break out in major metropolitan areas. And yet, in small pockets of resilience, Americans band together, volunteers directing traffic at darkened intersections, neighbors sharing meals cooked over open fires, communities rediscovering bonds that modern life had nearly erased. In the midst of collapse, a fragile thread of hope remains. The world watches in silence. If the most powerful nation on Earth can be brought to its knees by keystrokes, what does that mean for the rest of humanity? Is this the beginning of a new kind of warfare, where cyberattacks replace missiles and fear replaces bombs? Or is it only the opening salvo of a conflict that will eventually turn hot, dragging nations into a war no one can control? The blackout has shown one undeniable truth. The lines between peace and war are gone. The battlefield is everywhere inside your phone, your bank, your hospital, your home. And as America struggles to rise from the darkness, the haunting question remains. Will this crisis end with the lights turning back on, or with the world sliding into a conflict from which there is no return?